The call caught me at breakfast in the little cafe on Place Saint-Germain, where I'd been accustomed to starting my days for 15 years. The number on the phone screen looked familiar, but not immediately. International codes have a way of confusing the memory. When I realized the call was from Millville, my heart throbbed unpleasantly. They rarely called from there, and usually not with good news. Mrs. Penrose's voice trembled with indignation, though she was evidently trying to restrain herself. Elsie had always been a woman of restraint, brought up in the old-school tradition of keeping her nose out of other people's business. But what she had seen must have overflowed the cup of her patience. I had known Elsie for 35 years. She had been a neighbor before I moved to Europe, a punctilious woman of 74 who watered the flowers in the front garden at 7:30 sharp every morning and never interfered in other people's lives unless absolutely necessary. "Mr. Blackmore, I'm sorry to disturb you, but I just couldn't keep quiet any further," she began, and I knew at once that the matter was serious. Elsie wasn't the type to call for nothing, especially across the ocean. In all the years I'd known her, she'd contacted me only 3 times, and each time it had been for a good reason. I set my coffee cup aside and prepared to listen. Outside the cafe window, Parisian morning passers-by were hurrying and absorbed in their own affairs. Students with backpacks, elderly ladies with small dogs, business people with phones at their ears. The familiar hustle and bustle of the big city, in which I had dissolved over the years of living here. And now I suddenly felt my quiet European world begin to crack at the seams with a call from the past. "There's someone living in the house you bought for Ivy," Elsie blurted out without preamble. "It's the 3rd day now. A big car came, a truck like that, and they started unloading things. At first I thought maybe the girl had decided to move out early, even though I knew she wasn't 18 yet. But then I saw who it really was." The pause dragged on. I could hear Elsie breathing heavily, gathering her wits. Over the years I had known her, I had grown accustomed to her slowness, to the way she always chose her words carefully before she said anything. But now there was something new in her voice, an indignation she could barely contain. "This is your sister-in-law, Mr. Blackmore. Cassandra, with the children. They've made themselves at home there, as if they have every right to do so." The world around me seemed to slow down. The passers-by outside the window moved as if in slow motion, the sounds of the cafe muffled, and I felt a cold rage begin to rise somewhere in my chest. The house for Ivy. The house I'd bought a year and a half ago, thinking about my granddaughter's future, making sure she'd have her own place when she came of age. A small 2-story house on Elm Street, with a spacious front porch and a backyard where I could plant flowers. A house in which I had invested not only money, but hopes that at least something in this family would remain clean and unspoiled. "Tell me more about it, Elsie," I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. I was already seething with anger inside me, but Mrs. Penrose had to be spoken to evenly and politely. She wasn't to blame for what was happening, and what's more, she had risked disturbing my peace to warn me of the outrage. "Well, you know I'm not a nosy person, but when I saw the truck on Tuesday morning, I got worried. There's no telling what's going on. Maybe some thieves or something worse. I went to see if it was the workman you sent to fix something, and there's this Cassandra woman running the place, like she owns the place. The movers are hauling furniture, boxes, children's toys, bicycles. There was a lot of stuff. A lot of stuff. I envisioned this picture. Cassandra in her designer jeans and fancy blouse, telling the movers where to put her stuff. In a house that wasn't hers. In a house meant for her stepdaughter. The insolence of the situation boggled even my imagination, though I'd long known what my son's wife was capable of. "Did she notice you?" I asked. "Of course she noticed. It's hard not to notice when you're standing right at the fence and watching. But you know what the most striking thing is?" She wasn't embarrassed at all. She came up to me with a sweet smile, as if she'd met an old friend, and she said quite calmly, "Oh, Mrs. Penrose, it's good to have you here. We've decided to move here temporarily while Cornelius is away. I hope we won't disturb the neighbors." Temporary indeed. I've seen them settling in for good. Elsie was silent for a moment, then continued with growing indignation. "They're putting up the cribs, putting up the furniture in the bedrooms. They've even put up new curtains. And in the yard they've scattered toys and put up some kind of folding swings. This isn't just for a week, Mr. Blackmore. It's a long time. I closed my eyes, trying to digest what I'd heard. Cassandra, my son Jasper's wife, a woman I could never understand and who seemed to reciprocate. 28 years old, a beautiful blonde with ambition and nerves of iron, used to getting what she wanted by any means necessary. Able to manipulate my weak-willed son in such a way that he didn't even notice he was dancing to her tune. In the 14 years we'd known each other, Cassandra and I had never really hit it off. She had been emphatically polite to me, but I'd always felt coldness in her attitude, especially after I divorced Miranda and moved to Paris. Cassandra clearly thought I'd abandoned my family, though in fact I'd left just to preserve the remnants of my relationship with my son and granddaughter. "And how are the children behaving?" I asked, referring to her own children from her first marriage. "Yeah, they're both there. Little Reed and Cora. Reed seems to be a high schooler by now, and Cora's still just a baby. Running around the yard like they're at home, screaming, playing." Cassandra even told them not to make too much noise after 9 p.m., so the neighbors wouldn't complain. Can you imagine the nerve? It's like it's her house and she makes the rules for her kids. Reed and Cora. Cassandra's children by her first husband, whom she left for my son. Boy's about 8 now, girl's about 4. Not bad kids, really, just too spoiled by their mother's connivance. But the fact that they were now living in a house meant for Ivy added a special bitterness to the situation. "Mr. Blackmore, I realize it's none of my business," Elsie went on cautiously. "But it seemed to me that you ought to know. It's your granddaughter's home, isn't it? And now there are strangers running it, and I don't know what they think they're doing." Strangers. Cassandra was technically my daughter-in-law, but Elsie was right. In all the years I'd known her, I'd never been able to feel warm feelings for her. Moreover, every year I became more and more convinced that she was using Jasper to her advantage, turning him into an obedient husband who dared not cross her. "Is Jasper there?" I asked, though deep down I already knew the answer. "Haven't seen him. Probably at work. Although some car came by last night, maybe it was him, but I can't say for sure." Of course, Jasper wasn't there. He was working as a manager for a construction company, traveling to sites, coming home late and tired. Cassandra, meanwhile, was quietly settling into someone else's house, not even bothering to consult with her husband, or more likely had already agreed on everything with him. "Thank you for letting me know, Elsie," I said at last. "You did the right thing, and I'm very grateful." "What are you going to do now?" She couldn't resist asking. It was a good question. What am I going to do? Sit here in Paris, helplessly angry, call Jasper and demand an explanation, listening to his excuses and promises? Fly home and have a family scandal? Or act in a more creative way? "I'll think about it," I replied evasively. "Thanks again for calling, Elsie. I'll see you soon." After Mrs. Penrose said goodbye, I sat in the cafe for a long time, staring into my empty cup. The waiter, Jean-Pierre, came over several times, offering more coffee or some pastries, but I shook my head. My appetite was completely gone, and even my favorite croissant with almonds seemed inedible. Outside the window, life went on as usual. Tourists were taking pictures at the ancient fountain. Locals were hurrying about their business. Flower sellers were arranging their goods on the stalls. Paris lived, breathed, existed in its own special rhythm, and I sat here with a broken heart, thinking about the house in Millville, which was now being run by strangers. The house for Ivy. I'd bought it when my granddaughter was 16, planning to surprise her when she came of age. I wanted the girl to have a place where she could feel independent, grown up, free of family squabbles and maternal control. A place that belonged to her and no one else. I spent months looking for the right one, studying realtor offers, going to look at houses whenever I came to America. I wanted to find something special, not just square meters, but a place with a soul. And when I saw a house on Elm Street, I immediately realized, this is what I needed. Small but cozy, with large windows and spacious rooms, with a plot of land where you could make a garden. Cassandra and the children were now settled there. Temporarily, as she'd told Elsie. I wonder what she meant by temporarily. A month? 6 months? A year? Until I come back and drive them out by force? Or is she counting on me to accept the fact and let her stay? I pulled out my phone and started scrolling through my contacts. Jasper, the son who'd once been my pride, but now turned into a will-less husband, dancing to his wife's tune. 32 years old, college degree, good job, but a wimpy character. I needed to talk to him to find out what was going on, though I suspected it wouldn't be a pleasant conversation. Cassandra wasn't the type to act impulsively. Every move she makes is calculated, every decision weighed. If she decided to do something so brazen, it meant she was sure of her impunity. It means she expected me to keep quiet, to be patient, to not want to ruin what's left of my relationship with my family. That an old man across the ocean wouldn't mess with a young, brazen woman. How wrong she'd been. Jasper picked up the phone after the sixth ring, and I could tell by the way he said, "Hello," that he knew why I was calling. I could hear that distinctive tone in his voice that I'd learned to recognize when he was a teenager getting into trouble. A mixture of guilt, anxiety, and pre-prepared excuses. "Hi, Dad," he said a little more cheerfully, clearly trying to play it casual. "How are things in Paris? I didn't expect a call so early. I mean late. I mean, it's evening there." He'd gotten the timing right. It was morning in Millville, and I was really starting to get evening. But the nervousness in his voice gave him away. Jasper had always been a bad actor, unlike his wife, who could lie with a sincere expression and without blinking an eye. "Things are normal," I answered dryly. "Until a little while ago. I just got a call from Mrs. Penrose. Told me some interesting news about the house on Elm Street." There was a pause, a long, heavy pause during which I could hear Jasper breathing into the receiver, apparently frantically thinking of what to say. Over the years of living with Cassandra, he must have gotten used to moments like this, when he needed to get his bearings quickly and come up with a plausible version of events. "Ah, that," he finally squeezed out. "Dad, I wanted to call you myself, honestly. It just all happened so fast I didn't have time." "What exactly happened fast?" I asked, deciding to let him tell his side of the story himself. It was interesting to hear what colors my son would paint the situation with. "Well, you know," Jasper began, and I heard him moving around the house, apparently retreating to another room so Cassandra wouldn't hear the conversation. "We're having some housing problems here. The landlady decided to sell, put us out, and it's very hard to find something suitable on short notice, especially with children." Lies, just plain, unvarnished lies. I knew they'd been renting to an older woman for 4 years, and she'd never expressed any intention of selling. What's more, the last time we'd spoken to Jasper, which had been about 2 months ago, he complained about the upstairs neighbors, but hadn't mentioned any problems with the landlady. "I see," I said neutrally. "And when did this happen?" "A week ago," my son answered hastily. "She came and claimed we had to vacate the apartment in a month. Can you imagine? Just took it and put it in front of us. And we've got kids, jobs, we can't just stay on the street." There was a note of genuine resentment in Jasper's voice, as if he believed his own fiction. It was like him to start with a lie and then work his way into it so that it was almost true. Cassandra had taught him that art over their years together. "And that's when you decided to move into Ivy's house," I stated. "It was Cassandra's idea," Jasper said quickly, and in that haste was the only truth in the whole conversation. "She said the house was empty anyway, and we needed somewhere to live. Temporarily, Dad, just temporarily, until we find something of our own." Temporary, the same word Cassandra had used in her conversation with Mrs. Penrose. Apparently, they'd agreed on the wording beforehand, prepared a cover story in case someone started asking uncomfortable questions. "Jasper," I said quietly but firmly, "this house was bought for your daughter, for Ivy, not for Cassandra, not for her children, but for my granddaughter. Don't you understand that?" "I understand. Of course I understand," my son mumbled. "But Ivy's still a minor. She's 6 months away from her 18th birthday. And we have to live somewhere right now. It's not like we're moving there forever, Dad. Just for a while." I closed my eyes and rubbed the bridge of my nose. The headache was coming on slowly but surely. Listening to my son's excuses was excruciating, especially knowing that Cassandra, with her ironclad logic and lack of conscience, was behind every word he said. "What does Ivy herself think about this?" I asked. Another pause, this time even more eloquent. Well, she doesn't know yet," Jasper finally admitted. "I mean, she knows we moved, but she doesn't know why. We didn't want to upset her before final exams. Didn't want to upset her, I repeated slowly. And the fact that you're occupying her house won't upset her? Dad, don't say that, Jasper's voice took on a pleading note. We're family. Ivy will understand. And besides, the house is big. There's plenty of room for everyone. Maybe it's even better if she doesn't live there alone? That's it. Cassandra's classic trick of portraying her self-interest as caring for others. Of course, Ivy would be better off not living alone, but surrounded by her stepmother, who can't stand her, and her children, who will take up all the available space. How convenient it all worked out. Jasper, I said, trying to speak calmly, explain one thing to me. Why didn't you call me beforehand? Why didn't you ask permission? Would you have? He suddenly blurted out, and there was more sincerity in that question than in all the previous excuses. It was a good question. Would I have allowed it? If Jasper had been honest about his problems, asked for help, explained the situation, maybe we could have found another solution. I could have helped them rent another place to live, given them bail money after all. But instead they chose to act quietly, putting me in front of a fait accompli. We won't find out now, I replied, because you didn't give me that opportunity. You and Cassandra decided everything for me. That's not true, my son protested weakly. We just figured that since you're in Europe and not going back anytime soon. How can you be so sure? I interrupted. Who says I'm not going back? Jasper fell silent. I guess he realized he'd said too much. So he and Cassandra had been discussing my future, making plans on the assumption that the old fool would stay in Paris for the rest of his life. Dad, that's not what I meant, he tried to correct himself. It's just that you said yourself that you liked it there, that you had a new life. A new life. Yes, I did say that. After my divorce from Miranda, I needed to get away from Millville, with its gossip, judgmental stares, and reminders of a failed marriage. Paris was salvation, a city where no one knew me, where I could start over. For 15 years, I got used to the measured European life, made new friends, loved the local cafes and leisurely walks along the quays. But that didn't mean I cut all ties with America. I had a house in Millville, bank accounts, business interests, and most importantly, I had a granddaughter for whom I would do anything. I have a life here and there, I said firmly, and the house on Elm Street is part of my American life, part of the plans for Ivy's future. We understand that, Jasper hastily assured me, and we're very grateful to you for caring so much about your daughter. It's just that we're in a difficult situation right now, and we need help. Help? Interesting interpretation of squatting on someone else's property. Apparently, in Cassandra's family vocabulary, the word help had a special meaning. How long do you plan to stay there? I asked bluntly. 2 months, 3 at the most, Jasper answered quickly. As long as we find something suitable. You know how hard it is with rent right now, especially when you have kids. 2 to 3 months. Almost 6 months. By then, Ivy would be 18, graduating from high school, and the question of a house would come up. What then? Would Cassandra voluntarily move out, making room for her stepdaughter? Or would she find new reasons to stay? Where is Cassandra now, I asked. At home, Jasper answered, then immediately corrected himself. I mean at the house on Elm, getting settled in. She's enrolling her kids in school at the clinic. To the clinic. So the move is really planned for a long time. No one changes their kids' medical records for the sake of a temporary 2-month stay. Jasper, I said tiredly, you're a grown man, the father of a family. Don't you realize what's going on? Don't you see what it looks like from the outside? What does it look like? Defensive aggression appeared in the son's voice. It looks like a family in a difficult situation has asked for help from relatives. What's wrong with that? What's bad is that no one asked for anything, I replied stiffly. You just took over someone else's house without even letting me know. That's not called asking for help. It's called vigilantism. Jasper fell silent again. I could hear some sounds in the background, children's voices, the noise of the TV, the normal bustle of home life. Life in the house that wasn't theirs was going on. Dad, the son finally said quieter, apparently moving further away from the others. I understand that you're upset, but we're really in a difficult situation. Cassandra's really worried. The kids are stressed about the move. Maybe we could work something out. Arrange. Another word from my son's wife's vocabulary. When Cassandra said, let's negotiate, it always meant, let's do it the way I want it done, but make it look nice. What's to agree on, Jasper? I asked. About paying your utilities? About not breaking the furniture? Or about moving out before Ivy's birthday? We can discuss any terms, he said hastily. We're willing to cover all expenses. And of course, we'll have the house vacated by our daughter's birthday. That goes without saying. That goes without saying. How easy it was to make promises when they were still 6 months away. During this time, anything can happen. You can find new reasons to stay, new circumstances that will prevent the move. And an elderly father in faraway Paris? What could he do? I looked at my watch. The conversation was dragging on, and I still hadn't gotten answers to the main questions. But I realized the most important thing: Jasper had fallen completely under his wife's influence and could no longer distinguish between truth and convenient lies. I need time to think, I said finally. Of course, Dad, of course. Think it over. We're in no hurry to go anywhere, Jasper replied with relief, apparently deciding that the worst was over. No rush. No, they weren't. They're already home, already settled, already enrolled in the local school. What's the rush? I said goodbye to my son and put the phone on the cafe table. The waiter Jean-Pierre approached again, this time with a concerned look on his face. Mr. Blackmore, are you all right? You seem upset. Family problems, I replied briefly. Ah, I see. Jean-Pierre nodded sympathetically. Family's always complicated. How about some cognac? The offer was tempting, but I shook my head. What was needed right now was a clear head, not alcoholic oblivion. I needed to think, to plan, to make decisions. Dialing Cassandra's number, I knew this conversation would be drastically different from the one with Jasper. My son at least pretended to be ashamed, trying to justify himself, searching for words. Cassandra, on the other hand, never felt the need to hide her true motives behind polite language. She was a straightforward person to talk to without wasting time on diplomacy. She answered after the second dial tone, and the intonation of my name made it clear that Jasper had alerted her to my call. Cornelius, she said flatly, without the traditional polite greeting. Jasper said you called. I assume Mrs. Penrose has already reported our news to you? There wasn't an ounce of embarrassment or awkwardness in her voice. On the contrary, she sounded almost defiant, like a person who had every right to be where she was and was not going to justify herself to anyone. It was the tone she used whenever she thought her position was beyond reproach. Reported, I confirmed dryly. Reported in great detail. Trucks, furniture, cribs, impressive move. Yes, we decided not to delay, Cassandra replied nonchalantly. When making a decision, it's best to act quickly and decisively. Otherwise, you can get stuck in uncertainty for a long time. Philosophy of life in its purest form. Cassandra has always believed that the world belongs to those who are not afraid to take what they want. Politeness, delicacy, respect for other people's rights. To her, all of these were expressions of weakness that should be taken advantage of. I see, Renaissance, I said, and the decision to move specifically into Ivy's house was also made quickly and decisively. Of course, Cassandra sounded a slight sneer in her voice. What's so strange about that? The house is empty. We're homeless. Elementary logic, Cornelius. Though perhaps it is different in Paris. The outburst about Paris was predictable. Cassandra never missed an opportunity to remind me that I had abandoned my family and fled to Europe. In her mind, my move was an act of betrayal for which I had to pay for the rest of my life. In Paris, it is customary to ask permission before occupying another's property, I replied calmly. Someone else's, Cassandra feigned surprise. But the house is family. Ivy is your granddaughter. Jasper is your son. We're family, Cornelius. Or have you forgotten that? Classic move. When Cassandra needed to get something, she brought up family ties. The rest of the time, she made it pretty clear that she considered me an extra person in her husband's life. Family, I repeated slowly. Interesting. Don't family relationships involve respecting each other's interests? It does, Cassandra agreed. And that's why I think you should step into our position. We have children, Cornelius. Little children who need stability, a roof over their heads. Are you really willing to leave them on the streets for some formality? Children as a shield. Another of Cassandra's favorite moves. Whenever she needed to get her way, She put Reed and Cora out in front, making herself look like a victim of circumstance, fighting for the welfare of the little ones. As far as I understand, you're not on the street, I said. You had a rented apartment. I did, Cassandra replied stiffly. The key word is was. The landlady kicked us out. The contract was terminated. Would you like to provide references? Lies, of course. The same lie Jasper had tried to feed me an hour ago. But Cassandra fed it much more confidently, without hesitation or qualification. She could lie so convincingly that sometimes I began to believe her own fabrications. No need for references, I said. But explain one thing to me. Why Ivy's house in particular? There are plenty of rental options in Millville. Have you tried renting with 2 kids? A metallic note appeared in Cassandra's voice. Do you know what kind of deposits there are? What the requirements are? Do you know how long it takes to find a decent place? I have a rough idea, I replied, but this isn't your first move. You must have experience. There is experience, she agreed, and that's why I know it can take months to find a decent place to live. And children can't wait. They need to go to school, to the clinic, to live a normal life. The logic is ironclad if you forget that there are other options for solving the problem. One could stay with relatives, rent something simpler temporarily, ask for help from friends. But all of these options required a humiliation of pride, a recognition of dependence on other people. And Cassandra preferred to take what she needed by force. And you've decided that Ivy's house is the most suitable option, I stated. Didn't I? There was outright provocation in Cassandra's voice. The house is big, comfortable, in a good neighborhood, close to a great school, playground, everything you need. Perfect place for a family with kids. For Ivy's family, I reminded her. Ivy is 17 years old, Cassandra cut Cassandra off. She's a high school student, lives with her mother. Why does she need a separate house? To throw parties and skip class? There it was. Cassandra's true attitude towards my granddaughter. In her mind, Ivy was a spoiled brat who didn't deserve such a gift. The house should go to those who really needed it, which was herself. Ivy will be 18 in 6 months, I reminded her. The house was being bought as a coming-of-age gift. So what? Cassandra didn't give up. At 18, normal kids go to college, not play on their own. Or do you want your granddaughter alone in a big house at that age? Manipulation in its purest form. Cassandra was trying to portray my concern for my granddaughter as irresponsible and her seizure of other people's property as a display of common sense. I want Ivy to have a choice, I said firmly. A choice to live on her own or to continue living with her mother. But that choice should be hers to make, not yours. A choice, Cassandra snorted dismissively. Cornelius, let's be honest. You realize you're not going anywhere from Paris. You have your life established there, your friends, your habits. Why do you need American problems? How can you be so sure? I asked, repeating a question I'd already asked Jasper. From life, Cassandra replied stiffly. 15 years ago, you ran away from responsibility. You think I don't remember how it was? Divorce, scandals, and then goodbye? I'm in Europe. Very convenient. I didn't run away, I began, but Cassandra interrupted. Of course you didn't run away. Just happened to be overseas just when the family needed support. When Jasper was looking for a job, when our kids were born, when Ivy was going through her parents' divorce. Where were you then? The blow was painful precisely because it contained a sliver of truth. Yes, I had left during a difficult time for the family. Yes, my absence made life difficult for my son. But I couldn't stay in Millville after the divorce. There were too many memories there. Too difficult a relationship with my ex-wife. I provided for the family financially, I said. Helped with the kids' education, big purchases. Isn't that enough? Money is never enough, Cassandra replied with a candor that stunned me. But this isn't about money right now. It's about the fact that the house is empty and we need it. Is that so hard to understand? The house is empty temporarily, I reminded her, until Ivy's 18th birthday. And then what? Cassandra went on the attack. You think an 18-year-old girl is going to live alone in a house that big? Really? I mean, she's going to freak out on her own. She needs support, supervision, domestic help. Who's going to do that? Are you from Paris? There was a certain logic in her words, albeit perverse. Indeed, it could be difficult for an 18-year-old girl to live alone. But the solution to that problem was not to occupy her house in advance and dictate terms to her. Ivy will make up her own mind, I repeated. Of course she will. Cassandra's voice held unconcealed irony. A 17-year-old who can't make her bed without being reminded will be making real estate decisions. Very reasonable. Cassandra, I said, feeling my patience coming to an end. Let's end this conversation. You occupied the house without permission. That's a fact. Now I need to decide what to do about it. Decide what? She wasn't about to relent. I mean, we'll make an agreement like adults. We're willing to take on all the expenses of the house, pay the utilities, take care of the grounds. In fact, we'll be free caretakers. It's profitable. Free caretakers, another beautiful formulation for squatting. In Cassandra's mind, I should have been thanking her for choosing to live in my house at my expense. What about when Ivy turns 18? I asked. We'll see, Cassandra replied evasively. Maybe we'll find something suitable by then. Or maybe we can arrange to live together. The house is big. There's plenty of room for everyone. Sharing. I imagined Ivy having to share her home with her unloving stepmother and her children. No independence, no freedom. Just the constant presence of Cassandra with her ironclad rules and manipulative nature. This is unacceptable, I said stiffly. Why? Cassandra feigned bewilderment. We're a family. Is it wrong for a family to live together? Or are you against family values? Family values from a woman who had just taken over her stepdaughter's house. The cynicism boggled even my imagination. Family values involve respecting the rights of every family member, I replied, including Ivy's rights. Ivy will have every right, Cassandra assured me, just within reasonable limits. Someone has to keep order, keep the house safe, make sure it doesn't turn into a passing yard. Someone. Naturally, that someone had to be herself, to control, to direct, to set the rules. That was what Cassandra had wanted all along. Cassandra, I said tiredly, I need time to think. This conversation is going nowhere. Sure, think about it, she agreed generously. Just not for very long. The kids are already settling in, enrolled in school. The more time that passes, the harder it will be to change things. The threat was veiled but understandable. Every day I procrastinate on a decision will make their position stronger. The kids would get used to the new school. Cassandra would establish relationships with the neighbors. They'd make local connections. And then it would be really hard to evict them. Goodbye, Cassandra, I said, and hung up. She didn't say goodbye. Apparently, she thought she'd said all she wanted to say, and now it was up to me. Either I would accept the situation or I would try to do something about it. But she was sure I wouldn't get into any serious trouble. She was wrong. Patrick Quinn had always been a lark, so calling him at 7 o'clock in the morning, Millville time, was quite safe. In the 23 years we'd been working together, I knew his habits better than I knew my own son's. Patrick woke up at 6:30, drank coffee, read the news, and was ready for the day by 7, even if the office didn't officially open until 9. He answered after the first beep, and his voice sounded alert and collected. Unlike many lawyers I knew, Patrick never pretended to be a busy man with every minute to spare. He knew how to listen, analyze, and make clear recommendations, which is why I trusted him with all my American cases. Cornelius, he greeted me warmly. What a surprise, you usually call in the afternoon. Urgent business, I explained briefly. Need your help, Patrick, and may need to use the very documents we prepared 2 years ago. The pause was brief but eloquent. Patrick remembered perfectly well the documents in question. Back then, in 2023, when I'd bought the house for Ivy, we'd spent a good deal of time working out various scenarios to protect my interests. The house on Elmwood? He clarified. Exactly. Someone decided they could move in there without my permission. I see. Patrick's voice became businesslike. Tell me the details. I told him the entire situation as accurately as I could, from Mrs. Penrose's call to my conversations with Jasper and Cassandra. Patrick listened silently, occasionally asking clarifying questions. Over the years, he'd learned to grasp the essence of a problem half-heartedly and see possible solutions immediately. When exactly did they move in? He asked. 3 days ago, Tuesday. Good, so it hasn't been a week yet. That's important for the procedure. Patrick was silent for a moment. apparently checking against some paperwork. Cornelius, can you remind me, please, who is listed in the paperwork as the trustee for the estate? You are, I replied, and the management company, Millville Estate Management, as per our contract. Excellent. And is the security system installed? Of course. Security Plus, contracted for 5 years. Excellent. Patrick could hear the satisfaction in his voice. Then we have everything we need to solve the problem quickly. I leaned back in the chair of my Paris office, feeling the tension slowly ebb away. When buying a house for my granddaughter, it was no accident that I'd spent so much time on the legalities of the transaction. I knew my family too well, too clearly what they were capable of in a critical situation. Back then, 2 years ago, Patrick was initially puzzled as to why such elaborate protection schemes were needed for an ordinary family gift. It's a house for a granddaughter, he said. Why such precautions? But I had insisted and was now grateful for my own foresight. Patrick, I said, remind me of the main points of our defense scheme. I want to make sure I haven't forgotten anything. Of course, Patrick rustled up some papers. So the house is registered to you personally, but with the intended purpose being a gift to your granddaughter for her coming of age. Until she reaches the age of 18, the property is managed by trustees. That is me and the management company. Any decisions about living in the house are made solely by the owner. That is, you. Next, I nodded, though he couldn't see me. The security system is linked directly to the security agency and to my office. Any unauthorized entry or prolonged presence of unauthorized persons sets off an alarm. Utilities are paid through the trust, but can be disconnected at the request of the owner or his representative. I remembered those long discussions about how best to secure the house against squatting. Patrick suggested standard solutions. I insisted on more sophisticated ones. In the end, we created a system that allowed me to control the situation even when I was across the ocean. And most importantly, Patrick continued, the management agreement stipulates that anyone in the house without the owner's written permission for more than 7 days is considered a trespasser and is subject to forced eviction through the court or the sheriff's department. 7 days, a magic number that was now working in my favor. When we discussed the clause, Patrick had thought a week was too short. What if someone stops there for a while? With your verbal permission, he asked. A week is very short. But I was adamant. A week is plenty of time for a temporary guest and too short for someone to seriously settle in. So we have 4 more days? I clarified. Yes, but it's better to start the procedure immediately. The sooner we serve notice, the stronger our position. Patrick was right. In cases like this, time worked against the owner. Every day the trespassers spent in the house strengthened their psychological confidence in the validity of their actions. What steps do you suggest? When I asked. First, I will immediately issue a formal notice of violation. The document will be delivered personally with witnesses, so there will be no excuses. Second, I'll contact the management company and activate the access control procedure. Third, I'll alert the security agency to the situation. And the court? We don't need one yet. First, we'll give them a chance to leave voluntarily. If they refuse, we'll file a lawsuit for forced eviction. But the procedure will take time, and we'd rather solve everything quickly and quietly. I remembered my conversation with Cassandra, her confident tone, her hints of long-term plans. She'd obviously expected me to proceed slowly, through family negotiations and persuasion. The official paperwork would come as an unpleasant surprise to her. Patrick, what about the utilities? Can we turn them off? We can, but carefully. Turning off the water and electricity when there are children in the house can create problems with child services. It's better to start with internet and cable TV. These aren't vital services, but will create discomfort. Smart. Patrick was always thinking several moves ahead, anticipating possible complications. That's why I valued him as a lawyer. How long will the whole procedure take? I asked. In a favorable scenario, 3 to 4 days. People will get the documents, realize the gravity of the situation, and leave on their own. In an unfavorable scenario, up to 2 weeks if they have to go to court. 2 weeks, it's a bit long, but it's bearable. The main thing was that the process would start immediately, and Cassandra would realize that she wasn't dealing with a helpless old man, but with someone who knew how to protect her interests. Start the procedure, I said firmly, and keep me informed every step of the way. I will. Cornelius, may I ask you a personal question? Of course. You really didn't warn the family about the house being protected in this way? Good question. Indeed, I never told Jasper, much less Cassandra, about the legal intricacies of decorating the house. Why? It was a gift for Ivy, not a subject for family discussion. No, I didn't, I answered honestly. Figured it was between me and my granddaughter. I see. Then your reaction will come as a complete surprise to them. That's good. The confusion of the enemy always plays in our favor. After talking to Patrick, I felt strangely relieved. For the first time all morning, the situation no longer seemed hopeless. I had the tools to solve the problem. All I had to do was use them. I stepped out onto the balcony of my Paris apartment and looked out at the city slowly waking up to the morning sun. Somewhere out there, across the ocean, in a small house on Elm Street, people who considered themselves masters of other people's property were having breakfast. They drank coffee in my kitchen, watched television in my living room, put their children to bed in rooms meant for my granddaughter. But their peace of mind was illusory. In just a few hours, Patrick would spring into action, and then they would have to face reality, with documents they wouldn't be able to ignore, with procedures that no amount of eloquence could stop. I thought about that conversation 2 years ago, when Patrick and I had discussed the need for protective measures. At the time, the lawyer had deemed my concerns unnecessary. "This is your family," he had said. "Don't you trust your own son?" "I do," I answered then, "but I don't trust his wife, and it's better to be safe than sorry." Now that precaution came in handy. Cassandra had miscalculated, thinking that she was dealing with a weak old man who could be confronted and made to accept the fact. She didn't take into account that during my years in Europe, I hadn't lost any business skills, but had acquired new ones. Paris taught me a lot. Planning, foresight, and the ability to solve problems elegantly and efficiently were valued here. The French did not like brute force methods, preferring subtle but effective ways of achieving goals. And that's exactly what I'm doing now. No scandal, no family squabbling, no emotional tensions. Only documents, procedures, and the inexorable logic of law. The phone rang again. Patrick's number popped up on the screen. "Cornelius, I've already contacted the management company," he reported without preamble. "They've confirmed unauthorized occupancy of the house. A courier with a notice is leaving in half an hour. The paperwork will be delivered by noon." "Great," I replied. "What about utilities?" "Internet will be shut off at 16:00 tonight. Cable tomorrow morning. It will create enough discomfort, but no reason to accuse us of cruelty. Planned and methodical. That's exactly how one should have acted in a situation like this. Not emotional, not impulsive, but calculated and professional." "Thank you, Patrick. I look forward to hearing more." As I hung up the phone, I realized that for the first time all morning, I felt calm. The mechanism had been set in motion. The process was underway. Now all I had to do was wait for the results and enjoy the crumbling of the self-confidence of people who thought they could dispose of other people's property with impunity. On Friday morning, exactly 7 days after Cassandra's move, I sat in the same Paris cafe, waiting for Patrick to call me. It wasn't the right hour for international negotiations. It was just the beginning of the workday in Millville. But I knew the lawyer would contact me as soon as he received confirmation that the documents had been delivered. During that week, I had several conversations with Jasper, who tried to convince me to take things slow and give the family time to find alternatives. Each such conversation reinforced my confidence that I was on the right course. My son clearly did not understand the seriousness of the situation, continuing to view what was happening as a temporary misunderstanding that could be resolved through family negotiations. Cassandra didn't call again. After our last conversation, she had apparently decided that she had achieved her goal of getting my acquiescence to the status quo. That self-confidence was soon to backfire on her. Patrick acted methodically and professionally. On Monday, a courier delivered the first warning, which Cassandra, in Jasper's words, didn't even read, threw away immediately. On Tuesday, the internet went down, which caused the first bewilderment. On Wednesday, cable TV was gone, and Jasper called me with questions about some technical problems. I answered evasively, citing the peculiarities of maintaining vacant homes. On Thursday, the management company sent a representative for a routine inspection of the property's condition. Jasper told me that an official man in a suit was walking around the house with a clipboard, taking notes and pictures, and when asked, he said he was following the owner's orders. After his visit, Cassandra had first shown concern, but Jasper had reassured her by saying that Dad was just checking the condition of the house before handing it over to Ivy. Now the day of truth had arrived. On Friday morning, a courier was to deliver a formal eviction notice, demanding that the house be vacated within 48 hours. At the same time, the remaining utilities, gas and hot water, were cut off. Electricity and cold water remained so as not to endanger the children, but it was becoming extremely uncomfortable to live in the house. The phone rang at exactly 9 in the morning, Paris time. "Cornelius, the papers have been served," Patrick reported without preamble. The courier says the woman refused to accept them at first, but he explained that it was a mandatory procedure. She ended up signing a receipt. How did she react? According to the courier, she was surprised at first, then angry. Tried to find out who the sender was, but the courier invoked confidentiality, said it was some kind of mistake and she would complain. Predictable reaction. Cassandra couldn't believe her carefully thought-out plan had gone awry. She was probably frantically studying the paperwork right now, trying to figure out how serious the situation was. Did the utilities get shut off? Yes, the gas was turned off at 8 in the morning, hot water at 8:30. The technicians say the landlady ran out to them screaming, demanding an explanation. They were told to refer to the management company's order. I imagine the scene, Cassandra in her bathrobe trying to stop the workers turning off the gas. She must have tried to turn on all her charm to explain that she lived here with the owner's permission, that the children would freeze without heating, but the workers were just following orders, and no amount of persuasion worked on them. Patrick, what's next? What do you think their next move will be? Most likely, they'll try to contact you directly. When people receive official documents, the first reaction is to find the person who sent them and try to negotiate. Prepare for emotional phone calls. Patrick turned out to be right. Not 20 minutes later, the phone rang. Jasper's number. "Dad!" His son's voice shook with excitement. "What's going on? Cassandra got some papers and it says eviction. Is this some kind of joke?" "No joke at all," I replied calmly. "An official notice that you're illegally occupying someone else's property." "But how? Who?" "We had an agreement." Jasper was clearly confused. "You said you'd think about it." "I did think about it, and I've made a decision. You have 48 hours to vacate the house." 48 hours? Panic could be heard in his son's voice. "Dad, that's impossible. It's not like we can find a place to live in 2 days. Pack our things? We have children. You should have thought of that earlier before you moved into someone else's house without permission." "But we're family," Jasper said pitifully. "Would you really be willing to throw your own son out on the street?" The same argument Cassandra had used. Apparently, they had discussed in advance how to influence my feelings in case there was a problem. "I'm not throwing you out on the street," I replied stiffly. "I'm just getting my property back. The fact that you haven't taken care of alternative housing is your problem." "Dad, please be reasonable. We're willing to make whatever terms you want. We'll pay rent, reimburse all expenses. Just give us time." "You've had time, 7 days. In that time, you could have found a rented place to live if you really wanted to." 7 days with 2 kids? In this day and age? Jasper grew increasingly indignant. "That's unrealistic." "Then you shouldn't have caused yourself such trouble. The decision has been made, Jasper. It's final and irrevocable." There was silence after these words. Jasper must have realized that persuasion was not working. There were sounds in the receiver. Footsteps, muffled voices. Cassandra must have been standing nearby, telling him what to say. "Can I speak to Cassandra?" I asked. "Why?" "I want to hear what she has to say once she receives the official documents." Another pause, then the sound of the handset handing over. "Cornelius," Cassandra's voice sounded strained, but she was still trying to control the situation. "I think there's been some kind of mistake. We've received some strange papers." "There's no mistake," I replied. "That's right. You have illegally occupied my property, and now you must leave it." "Your property?" There was some metal in Cassandra's voice. "I thought it was a house for Ivy." "The house is registered to me. Ivy will get it as a gift when she comes of age. In the meantime, it's my property, and I decide who can live in it." "I see." Cassandra was silent, apparently digesting the information. "And shutting off the utilities is also your doing?" "Mine." The owner has the right to cut off services if there are uninvited guests in their home. Uninvited guests, she repeated bitterly. All right, Cornelius. It all makes sense now. You planned it all out in advance, didn't you? Interesting. Cassandra was smarter than Jasper and quickly realized that she wasn't dealing with an impulsive reaction, but with a premeditated defense system. I had to plan precisely because I knew you well enough, I answered honestly. Anticipated that something like this might happen. So you didn't trust the family from the beginning, Cassandra stated. Bought a house for your granddaughter, but prepared for war with your son and daughter-in-law. Prepared to protect Ivy's interests, I corrected. And, as it turns out, was doing the right thing. Cassandra fell silent again. When she spoke, her voice sounded different, cold and calculating. All right, Cornelius, you've won this game. But the game isn't over yet. What do you mean? And that Ivy is Jasper's daughter, and the father has rights to be involved in decisions about her future. It might be worth discussing the situation with the girl herself. The threat was veiled, but understandable. Cassandra was hinting that she would try to turn her granddaughter against me, to portray my actions as cruelty to the family. Discuss it with whomever you want, I replied indifferently, but you must vacate the house by the deadline. And if we don't, then you'll be forcibly evicted, through the courts and the sheriff's department, with far fewer amenities than you have now. I see. Cassandra must have finally realized that bluffing was useless. Well then, Cornelius, you've taught us a good lesson. Now we know what to expect from you. And that's fine, I agreed. Understanding is the foundation of a healthy relationship. After that conversation, I felt a strange satisfaction. Not schadenfreude, not revenge, just satisfaction that justice had been served. The people who thought they could dispose of other people's property with impunity had learned a lesson they would remember for a long time. The rest of the day passed quietly. Patrick called twice more, reporting on the progress of the procedures. The management company confirmed that all the necessary orders had been received. The security agency had been alerted to possible unauthorized entry attempts after the eviction. Everything was going according to plan. The mechanism that had been set in motion a week ago was working smoothly. Cassandra could resent and threaten as much as she wanted, but there was nothing she could do to change it. Documents were handed in, deadlines were set, procedures were set in motion. By late afternoon, I received a final message from Patrick. Cornelius, our men are watching the house. The family has started moving things out. They seem to have realized the seriousness of the situation and are preparing to move. It should be finished by noon tomorrow. So Cassandra had been smart enough not to go through with the eviction after all. She realized she was dealing with a serious adversary and chose to retreat with minimal casualties. A wise decision, albeit belated. Saturday morning began with a series of hysterical phone calls from Jasper. The first one came at 6 a.m. Paris time, midnight in Millville. I didn't answer, figuring I couldn't hear anything good at that hour. The second call came a half hour later, the third another 20 minutes later. By 7 in the morning, my son was calling every 5 minutes. Finally, I picked up the phone. You could hear the real panic in Jasper's voice, mixed with desperation and anger. Dad, you have to do something, he began without greeting. Cassandra's on the verge of a nervous breakdown. The kids are crying. Don't understand what's going on. We can't find lodging in one 24-hour period. You still had 24 hours yesterday, I reminded him. There are still a few hours left today before the deadline. A few hours? Jasper's voice hit a high note. Dad, do you realize what you're saying? We're a family. We have 2 small children. Do you really want us to spend the night in the car? The question was rhetorical, but I answered nonetheless. I want you to sleep where you have the right to, and you have the right anywhere but the house on Elm Street. That's cruelty, whispered Jasper. I don't recognize you, Dad. You've become a different man altogether. Interesting. In my son's mind, I was supposed to bear any disrespect, and when I started protecting my own interests, I became a stranger. Convenient logic. I've become a man who doesn't allow himself to sit on my neck, I replied stiffly. Perhaps this is really new to our family. Sitting on your neck? Jasper grew increasingly indignant. We asked for help in a difficult situation. It's called mutual aid, family support. Asked for, I interjected. When exactly did you ask for it? All I remember is you squatting in someone else's house and putting me in front of the fact. We, we thought you'd understand. You're a reasonable man. A reasonable man protects his property and his granddaughter's interests. That's exactly what I'm doing. There were some sounds in the receiver. Apparently Jasper was trying to soothe the crying children or talking to Cassandra. Then his voice grew quieter, as if he'd withdrawn into another room. Daddy, listen to me carefully, he said suddenly, very seriously. Cassandra says you've made a big mistake, that you're going to get in trouble for the way you're treating us. What kind of trouble exactly? I inquired. Legal. She says it's against state law to forcibly evict a family with children without providing alternative housing, that you can sue and demand compensation. An empty threat. Cassandra tried to scare me with legal consequences, not realizing that I am acting strictly within the law. Moreover, acting through a professional attorney who knows the ins and outs of local law. Let her sue, I replied indifferently. Only first let her find a lawyer who will take on a case she knows is a loser. You do realize that would ruin our relationship permanently, don't you? Jasper suddenly said quietly. We'll never be a family again after this. It wasn't a threat in his voice, but genuine sadness. For perhaps the first time in the entire conversation, his son was saying what he really felt, not what his wife told him to say. Jasper, I said more softly, the family didn't break up today. It was destroyed the moment you decided to deceive me and go behind my back. Today, I'm simply stating a fact. But we can fix it, a pleading note appeared in her son's voice. We'll vacate the house, find another place to live, apologize. Just give us a chance to make things right. You've had the chance all these days. Instead of looking for alternative housing, you've been settling into someone else's home, enrolling your children in the local school, making long-term plans. We didn't make any long-term plans, Jasper protested weakly. That's a lie. Cassandra told me herself that you needed the house indefinitely. That Ivy at 18 doesn't need a separate apartment. Jasper fell silent. Apparently he realized that all his excuses sounded lame. Dad, he said finally, what if we pay for it? Reimburse all expenses, bail us out for possible damages. What if we pay market rent? The house isn't for rent. It's meant for Ivy. But her majority is still 6 months away. Is it really better that it should be empty? Much better, I answered firmly. An empty house can be prepared for a new tenant. A house occupied by squatters is much more difficult to vacate. Squatters? Jasper repeated bitterly. You're calling your own son a squatter. I'm calling things by their proper names. What you've done is legally defined exactly as squatting. The phone was handed over again. This time Cassandra spoke without prior pleasantries, stiff and direct. Cornelius, I'll try to explain the situation to you, she began. We have no money for a hotel. We have no relatives to shelter us. We don't have time to find a proper place to live. What do you suggest we do? I suggest we should have thought of that before, I replied, before moving into someone else's house. We thought you were a human being, not a heartless machine. Cassandra's voice was filled with outright venom. Thought family ties meant something to you. Family ties mean a lot. That's why I was buying a house for my granddaughter instead of throwing money away. For a granddaughter, Cassandra snorted dismissively. And where was that granddaughter when you divorced her grandmother? Where was she when you left for Europe? For 17 years, you've had little or no involvement in her upbringing, and now all of a sudden you remember your grandfatherly duties? The blow was painful precisely because it contained a grain of truth. Yes, I had indeed seen my granddaughter less often since my divorce from Miranda. Yes, moving to Paris had limited our communication. But that didn't mean I stopped caring for her. I've always helped Ivy financially, I said. Paid for her education, health insurance, summer camps. With money, Cassandra cut Cassandra off, decided everything with money. Where was your involvement, your attention, your love? Love manifests itself in caring for the future. Among other things, Granddaughter replied. The house for Ivy is a manifestation of love. A house you bought in secret from the rest of your family, Cassandra persisted. A house that was supposed to be a surprise for a girl, but turned into a weapon of revenge against your son and daughter-in-law. A weapon of defense, I corrected, from people who think they have the right to dispose of other people's property. We're not strangers, Cassandra's voice cut through the hysterical notes. We're family. Jasper is your son. The children are your grandchildren in essence. Are you really willing to destroy everything for the sake of some principles? Ready to protect Ivy's interests at all costs, I replied firmly. Ivy, Cassandra said her granddaughter's name with a peculiar intonation. And do you know what Ivy herself thinks about what you did? What exactly does she think? That you're a cruel egomaniac who's willing to throw your family out on the street for your own ambitions, Cassandra replied stiffly. Jasper told her everything. The girl is shocked at the way you treat her father. A new blow, even more painful. Cassandra was trying to deny me the support of the very granddaughter I'd set this whole thing up for. Ivy is a minor, I said after a pause. She doesn't understand all the circumstances. But she does understand that her grandfather kicks her family out of the house in the wintertime, Cassandra persisted. Realizes that young children could be left homeless. Do you think she'll ever forgive you for that? The question hung in the air. Cassandra was clearly counting on the threat of losing her granddaughter's favor to make me back down. But one thing she hadn't considered was that I was protecting Ivy's interests on principle, not gratitude. Time will tell, I replied calmly. When Ivy grows up, she'll understand my motives. If she understands, Cassandra said ominously, but that won't be anytime soon. In the meantime, all she sees is an abusive grandfather who is destroying her family's life. The family that tried to steal her house, I reminded her. We didn't steal anything, Cassandra exploded. We temporarily used a vacant property in an emergency. That's called common sense. It's called vigilantism. And vigilantism is something you have to pay for. After those words, Cassandra fell silent. When she spoke again, her voice sounded cold and threatening. All right, Cornelius, you've won. We will leave. But remember, all actions have consequences, and so do your actions. What kind of consequences? I inquired. You'll see, she replied succinctly and hung up. Threats in the style of cheap thrillers. Cassandra was trying to do a final impression, but it came out rather pathetic. People who lost a game rarely knew how to admit defeat with dignity. Patrick called an hour after talking to Cassandra. Cornelius, good news, he reported cheerfully. The house is being vacated. The truck is already being loaded. The family's getting ready to leave. It'll be finished by tonight. Great, I replied. What about the keys? The management company will change all the locks on Monday, just in case. They'll probably keep the keys, though. Under these circumstances, people usually don't want to cause additional problems. Makes sense. Stealing the keys would be an outright crime by now, not just a family misunderstanding. Cassandra, for all her chutzpah, would hardly dare to take such a step. What's next? I asked. Next, the house goes under heavy security until Ivy's birthday. Alarms, video surveillance, regular rounds. No one else can move in without your permission. Excellent. Thank you for your professional work, Patrick. You're welcome. Though I confess, I don't much like this sort of thing. Family conflict is not a pleasant thing. But instructive, I replied, for everyone involved. As I hung up the phone, I felt a strange emptiness. The week of tension was over. The goal had been achieved. Justice had been served. But there was no joy, only fatigue and bitterness that it had come to such a confrontation. Family. Jasper was right about one thing after what had happened. We'd never be a real family again. Too much had been said. Too deep wounds had been inflicted. But maybe it's for the best. Illusions are painful to shatter, but once they're shattered, you can build a more honest relationship, if at all. 3 weeks after Cassandra's eviction, I made the decision to fly to Millville. Not to check on the condition of the house. Patrick had sent regular reports to the management company, and everything was fine. Not to make peace with the family. The bridges had been burned thoroughly and no one was going to rebuild them. I was going for a more prosaic reason. I wanted to make sure the house was ready for Ivy and to settle a few business matters at the same time. The plane landed at the Millville airport on a rainy February day. Gray sky, wet asphalt, dull faces of passers-by, a typical American province at the most depressing time of the year. It looked especially bleak after sunny Paris, but I didn't regret the decision to come. Some things have to be done in person. Patrick met me at the airport. He hadn't changed much in the years we'd been working together, the same trim man in his 50s, wearing an impeccable suit and carrying a folder of documents under his arm. When he saw me, he smiled with genuine warmth. Cornelius, good to see you, he said, shaking my hand. How was the flight? Fine, I'm used to it by now. I looked around. The city hasn't changed. It's still gray and dreary. But it's peaceful, Patrick remarked. No one's evicting anyone. No one's suing anyone. It's almost idyllic. We walked toward the terminal exit, and Patrick briefed us on the situation. The Elm Street house was secure, and all systems were working properly. Jasper and his family rented a small apartment on the outskirts of the city. They found it a week after the eviction. Cassandra had tried to file a complaint with the municipal authorities about the illegal actions of the management company, but was politely explained that the owner had every right to dispose of their property. "What about Ivy?" I asked as we got into Patrick's car. "Hard to say," the lawyer shrugged. "She's called me a couple times, asking about the house situation. I explained that the house was meant for her, that it was a coming-of-age present. She listened but didn't show much emotion." "I see. Have you heard from Jasper?" "Called 5 times in the first few days after we left. He demanded compensation for moral damages, threatened to sue, accused me of abuse of power. Then he calmed down. Apparently someone explained to him that I acted strictly according to the law. We drove along familiar streets, and I was surprised to note how little the city had changed during my absence. The same stores, the same signs, even the potholes in the road in the usual places. Millville was a town where time flowed slowly and reluctantly. "Where to first?" Patrick asked. "To the hotel or straight to Elmwood?" "Straight to the Elm. I want to see what condition the house is in." The house greeted us with perfect order. The management company had worked diligently. Everything had been cleaned, repaired, and prepared for the new tenants. There were almost no traces of Cassandra's stay with the children, except for a few scratches on the parquet in the children's room and a child's handprint on the glass door of the veranda. I walked around the rooms, checking the furniture, the plumbing, the condition of the walls. Everything was in exemplary order. Cassandra, for all her faults, knew how to keep a place clean. Even in such a stressful situation, she made sure not to leave a mess behind. "Professional cleaning?" I asked Patrick. "Yes, right after checkout. Plus some minor repairs, painted the walls, changed a couple outlets the kids managed to loosen." In the bedroom on the second floor, I found a forgotten children's toy. A small teddy bear stuck behind the radiator. Apparently, it had been overlooked in the rush of packing. The toy was worn, clearly a favorite. Surely one of the kids must be missing their bear right now. I picked up the toy and showed it to Patrick. "Should I give it to the owners?" the lawyer asked. I thought for a few seconds. The rational decision is to give the toy to the child. The human decision was not to exacerbate an already strained relationship. "Hand it over," I finally decided. "Through the management company, anonymously. Just leave it at their apartment door." "Okay." Patrick tucked the bear cub into his pocket. "Will do." We finished our inspection of the house by late afternoon. All the systems worked, all the paperwork was in order, and all the formalities were in place. Ivy could move in any time after her 18th birthday, 3.5 months from now. That evening at the hotel, I called my granddaughter. I had her phone number, but I rarely called her. After moving to Paris, our relationship had become rather formal. A few congratulations on the holidays of the year, short, polite conversations, exchange of news. Now I was about to have my first serious conversation in years. Ivy didn't answer right away. When she heard my voice, there was wariness in her tone. "Grandpa? Hi. Dad told me you flew in." "I did. Wanted to see your house. Make sure everything's ready." "My house," she repeated without much emotion. "The one that got Dad and Cassandra kicked out?" A direct question demanded a direct answer. "That's right. The house I bought you as a coming-of-age present." "I see." Ivy was quiet. "Why didn't you tell me before?" "I wanted to surprise you, to give you a house on your birthday. But what came out was not a surprise, but a scandal for the whole family." "That's a fair point. Indeed, a beautiful surprise plan turned into a family war." "Unfortunately, yes," I admitted. "But I didn't have a choice, Ivy. Your dad and Cassandra occupied the house unauthorized, without asking permission. They were in a difficult situation," my granddaughter said cautiously. "They didn't have money for another place to live." Cassandra's version of the story, stated through the mouth of a child. I wondered how many times Ivy had to listen to stories about an abusive grandfather who kicked the family out into the cold winter. Ivy, I said softly, if a person doesn't have money for housing, they ask for help, explains the situation, looks for a way out with his relatives, not taking over someone else's property in secret from the owner. But it's a family, she objected. Couldn't it have been negotiated somehow? It could have been, if they really wanted to negotiate with me instead of putting me on the spot. Ivy fell silent again. I could hear her breathing, apparently mulling over my words. Grandpa, she said finally, did you really buy the house just for me? I really did. A year and a half ago. Wanted you to have your own place when you became an adult. Why? Good question. Why does a lonely old man living across the ocean buy a house for a granddaughter he only sees once a year? Because I believe in you, I answered honestly. Because I want you to have the opportunity to live on your own if you want to. And if I don't want to, then you'll rent out the house and earn an income, or sell it and spend the money on your education. The decision is yours. Up to me, Ivy repeated thoughtfully. So I can do whatever I want with the house? Yes, it's your house, your choice. What if I want to let Dad and Cassandra in there? The question was expected, but it made it no less painful. Ivy was testing how serious I was about her right to choose. It will be your decision, I said after a pause. I'll be against it, but I won't stop it. Why would you oppose it? Because the house was bought for your independence, and with Cassandra, you won't be independent. Ivy laughed, for the first time in the entire conversation. That's for sure. No one is independent with Cassandra, not even Dad. There was more insight into the family situation in those words than I'd expected from a 17-year-old girl. So you see a problem? I see it, Ivy replied seriously. Just feel sorry for them, especially Reed and Cora. It's not the kids' fault that the adults can't agree. Fair enough. It really wasn't the kids' fault. But that's no reason to let their parents violate someone else's rights. Kids are pathetic, I agreed. But the parents are responsible for them, not me. I understand, Ivy was quiet. Grandpa, can I look at the house? Just take a look without making any decisions? Sure, tomorrow morning if you'd like. I want to. Will you be there? I will if you don't mind. I don't mind, Ivy said. On the contrary even, I think we need to talk. A real talk. After talking to my granddaughter, I sat at the hotel window for a long time, looking out at the lights of Millville. The city was asleep, the occasional car passing through the deserted streets, the neon sign of a 24-hour gas station blinking somewhere in the distance. Ordinary provincial life, which I had once been a part of, but now I was looking at it from the outside. Tomorrow would be an important conversation with Ivy. It had a lot to do with how our relationship would turn out in the future. Would she understand my motives? Would she forgive the family conflict? Would she use the gift or reject it out of solidarity with her father? Time will tell. But today I was calm. I did what I thought was right, protected what I thought was important. The house on Elm Street was waiting for its mistress, and that was the main thing. Everything else was a matter for the future. Outside the window, Millville was slowly falling asleep, and I thought about the fact that some decisions have to be made alone, even if they make you an enemy to the people closest to you. The price of principles is sometimes very high, but the alternative, a life without principles, costs even more.